Hey, 42 here. It was a normal day on the planet Arran when, as if from nowhere, a moon-like blob appeared in the sky. Not that many of the planet's 2 billion inhabitants actually noticed. The unidentified object was tiny, so only people who happened to be looking in exactly the right spot when it appeared would have had any chance of seeing it. To those lucky few, I can only assume the sudden appearance of a brand new mini-moon in the sky was quite an exciting, even awe-inspiring event. But that excitement didn't last very long, because all of a sudden, the object began to glow. Seconds later, Arran exploded with a blinding green light that seemed to devour the entire sky as a blast of pure heat vaporized the air and boiled the oceans. In a matter of seconds, it was over. The beautiful mountain planet of Arran was gone, and everyone who'd been unfortunate enough to live there at the time was dead. Okay, so for all you non-Star Wars geeks out there, what I just described was the laser-based destruction of the planet Arran by the Empire's iconic doomsday device, the Death Star. It's a seminal scene in the first Star Wars film, and arguably one of the most famous moments in all of cinema. And it got me thinking, is a planet-killing weapon like the Death Star actually a physical possibility? And if it is, could I build one? I mean, could we, that is, humans, build one? Sorry, always wanted to be a supervillain when I was growing up. Speaking of being an evil genius, I'm a huge fan of Stellaris, a grand strategy space exploration game, where you can really become the evil intergalactic dictator you've always dreamt of becoming. Or if you'd prefer, you can become a nature-loving species of anthropoids. Oh, and did I mention? Yes, you can destroy a planet in Stellaris. Nice. Actually, Stellaris offers multiple ways to destroy a planet. You can research and build a colossal ship. There are 3 classes of colossal ship: the Colossus, the Juggernaut, and the Star Eater. Each one can destroy a planet after you equip it with the celestial body eradicating weapon of your choosing. Would you prefer to use a global pacifier to destroy a planet, or the World Cracker? My money's on the latter. Furthermore, if you build the Star Eater Colossus, you can equip it with the Star Cracker weapon and devour entire stars. You can have a go at destroying planets for free this weekend by trying Stellaris using the link in the description. Don't miss out. Thanks to Stellaris for sponsoring this video. The first thing I want to point out here, and forgive me for stating the obvious, is that destroying a planet of roughly the size and composition of Earth is quite a hard thing to do. You may have heard a rumor that if we were to detonate all the nuclear weapons on Earth at the same time, the planet would explode. But that couldn't be further from the truth. On a planetary scale, we humans and our grand schemes are practically irrelevant. You'll often hear people talking about how we're killing the planet through things like climate change and mass deforestation, but we really aren't. Like, not even a tiny bit. What we're actually doing is making our planet significantly less livable for ourselves and every other living thing that's found here. As for the planet itself, seriously, it couldn't give any less of a f***. Earth is a 6 septillion kilogram wrecking ball made of rock and iron. 6 septillion. That's a 6 with 24 zeros after it. In the past 600 million years alone, it survived impacts from at least 60 asteroids with a diameter of 5 or more kilometers. One of the largest of those struck Earth 66 million years ago, and according to some estimates, it might have been close to 100 kilometers across. It smashed into our planet with the explosive power of 10 billion nuclear weapons, wiping out 75% of life, including all non-avian dinosaurs, and leaving behind a 180-kilometer wide crater. On a human scale, it was an unimaginably devastating event, a genuine apocalypse, but the planet as a whole hardly even noticed. What I'm trying to say is that, in technical terms, planet Earth is one chunky boy. Destroying it, or a planet like it, would require a weapon trillions of times more powerful than anything in existence today. As for what that weapon might look like, well, it turns out something like the Death Star might actually be a pretty good place to start. When I say the word laser, there's a fair chance your mind conjures up images of those little laser pointers fancy-pants business types like to use in presentations. But even today, military-grade laser technology is already pretty frightening stuff, with the power to target and destroy aircraft and even satellites mid-flight. So all we'd need to do to make a weapon of Death Star proportions is scale things up a bit. Well, I say a bit. To completely destroy something as big as a planet, we'd need to develop a laser with around 1 billion trillion times more power than the lasers we have today. And even if we were actually able to do it, such great power would inevitably come with great economic responsibilities. Back in 2012, some bright spark set up a petition to the US government in an attempt to secure funding for the construction of an actual Death Star, citing the very reasonable benefits of a boost to national security and the creation of millions of jobs. The petition gained almost 35,000 signatures, and remarkably enough, the White House actually responded. Sadly, that response was a hard no, due to an estimated total build cost of about $850 quadrillion, about 13,000 times the GDP of every country on Earth put together at the time. There would also be plenty of engineering problems to overcome too. No lasing material known to man would be able to withstand the incredible heat of such a device. And whatever humanity's Death Star itself was actually made out of would melt like an Easter egg in a blast furnace as soon as it was turned on. Hey, maybe one day it'll be possible, and like in Stellaris, we'll see world-cracking lasers. But realistically, we're talking hundreds, or more likely thousands of years in humanity's future. Luckily, there's more than one way to skin a cat, and indeed, destroy a planet. And at least one of those ways employs a technology, or should I say, substance, that we've already been producing for a good 70 years or so. Antimatter. Think of antimatter as being a bit like regular matter's evil twin, a material composed of antiparticles with properties that are the exact opposite of regular matter. Antimatter is fascinating stuff that deserves an entire video on its own. But for the purposes of this one, all we need to know is that when antimatter and regular matter meet, they annihilate each other, releasing vast amounts of energy. So much energy that a single gram of antimatter could create an explosion comparable in size to that of a nuclear bomb. The very fact that it instantly blows up when it comes into contact with regular matter, which, as you probably noticed, is absolutely bloody everywhere, makes antimatter rather difficult to handle. It can't be stored in any kind of conventional matter-based containers, for obvious reasons, instead needing to be held suspended within powerful magnetic fields. And it turns out that isn't even the biggest issue we'd have to overcome to build a viable antimatter bomb. As we've already established, Earth is a chunky boy, and so we'd still need a few trillion tons of antimatter to destroy it. But making antimatter is tricky. To do so, you need, amongst other things, a powerful particle accelerator, like the Large Hadron Collider at CERN in Switzerland. But even if you were to run that formidable machine non-stop as a dedicated antimatter factory, it would still only produce about 1/1000th of a gram of antimatter per year. Meaning the entire lifespan of the universe might not provide us with enough time to make an antimatter-based doomsday device capable of chunking a planet. Even if it did, the total cost of the project would make building a Death Star look like a bargain. Estimates vary, but as of today, creating a gram of antimatter cost about $63 trillion. Just as was the case with lasers, the problem here is one of scale. One-shotting something as big as a planet requires us to push the kinds of destructive technologies we currently know about to almost unimaginable limits. But then, maybe we've been looking at this problem from the wrong perspective. What if, instead of building one giant world-ending weapon, we just make a crap ton of little ones? Well, not weapons exactly, more like weaponized self-replicating robots. It's an idea that's being explored by such scientific heavyweights as Freeman Dyson and John von Neumann, and it's both incredibly simple and absolutely ingenious. Imagine you designed a robot of roughly the same combination of materials that your target planet is made out of. Now imagine that robot had the capability both to harvest those materials and use them to create an exact copy of itself. In theory, all you'd have to do is build and activate a single one of those robots to destroy an entire planet. Let it loose, and as per its programming, the robot would head out into the world, looking for a likely spot, then start to dig. Once it had collected all the raw materials necessary, it would pause to build a clone of itself. Once complete, both the clone and its parent would move on, harvesting more raw materials and turning them into new generations of clones. Intuitively, you might assume it would take forever to destroy a planet this way, but the number of clones would double with every generation, meaning the total population will grow exponentially. After just 40 generations, more than 1 trillion self-replicating robots would be busy taking your planet apart, piece by piece. All this talk of self-replicating robots reminds me of the Grey Tempest special event in Stellaris. I fondly remember the first time I encountered it in-game, after passing through a mysterious warp gate I discovered in a far-off star system. It really freaked me out, and before I knew it, my homeworld was being bombarded by alien nanites, slowly devouring my population. It might sound like a fairly outlandish concept, but think about it. What I've just described, an autonomous machine that harvests raw materials from its environment in order to make copies of itself, isn't that just an accurate description of a human being? Or any other animal, for that matter? There would still be some fairly major challenges to overcome along the way, like exactly how these machines would handle temperatures of more than 5,000 degrees Celsius in the planet's core, for example. But in many ways, self-replicating robots might be the most feasible way for humans to destroy a planet, partly because they completely circumvent the whole scale issue we see with more conventional weapons. With all this talk of how we could harness human technology to build the most destructive weapons in existence, it's easy to forget that there are already untold trillions of super weapons basically just lying around all over the place throughout the entire universe. We don't tend to think of them that way, of course, but there's a good chance nothing human-made will ever rival the sheer might and majesty of your average run-of-the-mill star or world-ending terror of a bog-standard black hole. So rather than spending our time dreaming up inventive ways to speed up antimatter production or Dynamax our lasers, we might be better off just shooting whatever it is we want to destroy at the nearest star or black hole, either of which would be capable of swallowing a planet the size of Earth as easily as you might eat an after-dinner mint. Moving something as big as a planet is of course a mammoth task that presents a fair few scale problems all of its own, but for now, it might prove to be rather easier than blowing one up entirely. Thanks for watching.